So, you want to own an injection molding factory. It sounds simple. Buy the machines. Melt some plastic. Shoot it into a mold. Sell the parts. Land a few contracts, bottle caps, car dashboards, medical syringes, and let the machines run. But that isn't actually the business. The real business isn't plastic at all. It's time. More specifically, it's owning a machine that can only make money while it's physically moving. Stop that machine for just 6 hours. And you haven't simply lost 6 hours of production. You've lost money you can never get back. And that single fact, that these machines are essentially melting cash the moment they go idle, drives almost every major decision a factory owner makes. It's why some plants quietly become extremely profitable, and why others, despite having full order books, quietly go bankrupt. So, let's find out how. Part 1. The illusion. Most people assume the business is simple manufacturing. You make plastic parts. You sell plastic parts. And whatever is left over is profit. But here's what almost nobody realizes. Injection molding companies don't really sell plastic. They sell machine hours. A molding machine costing anywhere from $80,000 for a small, used unit to more than $1 million for a large, precision industrial press is essentially a rented asset. It's rented to whichever customer's mold happens to be clamped inside it that day. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because the factory owner isn't really managing a product. They're managing a calendar. Every hour matters. Every machine matters. And every hour. Part 2. The cost of getting started. Getting into this business is brutal. A modest facility, somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000 square feet, can cost roughly $1.5 million to $4 million to buy or build. And that depends heavily on location, zoning, and whether the building needs industrial-grade electrical service, which it almost always does. Injection molding machines are power-hungry. A single large press can consume as much electricity as 15 homes combined. Then come the machines themselves. A working shop typically needs at least 5 to 10 presses to become viable. That means roughly $500,000 to $3 million in equipment alone, before you've even made a single mold. And then there are the molds. The steel tooling that actually gives the plastic its shape. A single custom mold might cost $20,000 for something relatively simple, or more than $100,000 for a complex, multi-cavity automotive mold. And here's the part many first-time owners don't realize. That cost is often passed on to the customer, but the factory owner may still have to front the cash and wait months to get reimbursed. Then come permits, air emissions, wastewater, fire suppression, safety systems, and specialized controls for resin dust and other industrial hazards. All of that can add another $50,000 to $150,000. And it sounds like a small detail. It isn't. Regulatory delays alone can push a factory opening back by 6 months or more. 6 months where rent is still due. Loan payments are still due. Insurance is still due. But revenue? Zero. Part 3. How the money actually flows. So, where does the money really come from? The obvious answer is per part pricing. Pennies per plastic component, multiplied by millions of units. And yes, that's real. But it's often the thinnest margin in the business. Sometimes only 8 to 15%. The real money can hide in 3 places. First, tooling markups. A factory may charge customers 20 to 40% above the actual cost of building their mold. Why? Because the owner has already committed the capital and is taking the risk if the customer walks away. Second, long-term supply agreements. Multi-year contracts with automakers, medical device companies, and major consumer brands can guarantee volume, sometimes locking in pricing for 3 to 5 years. These contracts are gold because they give an owner the confidence to buy additional machines instead of gambling on whatever orders happen to appear next month. And third, the quiet one, engineering and design services. Customers will often pay a premium simply to have the factory's engineers identify and fix a flawed part design before that part is ever molded. That service can produce margins north of 40%. far higher than the molding operation itself. And that's where the business becomes really interesting. The plastic part may actually be the least valuable thing being sold. The real product is the relationship and the engineering expertise behind it. Part 4. The hidden costs. Now comes one of the most expensive mistakes a new owner can make. Underestimating what breaks. Molding machines can run 24 hours a day in many plants, and they're constantly dealing with heat, pressure, friction, and thousands of moving cycles. Preventive maintenance alone can cost $15,000 to $40,000 per machine every year. Ignore it. And one major hydraulic failure could cost $50,000, while shutting a production line down for weeks. Then there's electricity, often the second largest expense after labor. For a mid-sized plant, energy costs can exceed $200,000 a year. And those machines consume power whether or not a customer's order is profitable that month. Then add compliance costs, hazardous resin fumes, worker safety training, mandatory equipment inspections, and rising commercial insurance premiums. Insurance alone can consume 3 to 5% of total revenue in some operations, partly because of fire risks and heavy machinery injury claims. But there's another quiet killer: resin price volatility. Plastic resin is largely derived from oil and natural gas. So when energy prices spike, resin costs can jump 20 to 30% in a single quarter. And here's the problem. Many contracts don't allow the factory owner to pass those higher costs to the customer immediately. So the factory keeps producing, while the margin quietly disappears. Part 5. The economic engine. And this is where everything changes. Because underneath all of these costs, there's one number that can determine whether a factory becomes a fortune or a slow bankruptcy: capacity utilization. An injection molding machine has a huge amount of fixed cost. The loan payment, the building lease, the base labor, insurance, maintenance. All of those expenses continue whether the machine runs 40% of the time or 95%. But revenue only arrives when the machine is actually producing. That creates a powerful effect. A plant operating at 60% utilization and a plant operating at 90% aren't simply 30% apart in profitability, because the fixed costs remain almost the same. That additional machine time can send a disproportionate amount of revenue straight to the bottom line. In other words, once the basic costs are covered, every additional productive hour becomes extremely valuable. That's the real economic engine of injection molding. Not what you make, but how relentlessly you keep the machines moving. Part 6. The psychology that you missed. So why do customers, automakers, medical companies, and consumer brands sometimes tolerate long-term exclusive contracts with a single molding supplier, instead of shopping around every quarter? Because switching suppliers can be incredibly expensive. Once a mold has been built and validated for a specific machine and process, moving it to a new supplier can mean weeks of requalification, especially in highly regulated industries like medical devices. The customer isn't just buying plastic parts anymore. They're buying consistency, reliability, and a proven manufacturing process. And that creates something extremely valuable: switching costs. But the psychology works against factory owners too. Why do owners keep buying more machines during downturns? Because empty floor space feels like wasted opportunity. An idle machine feels like money being left on the table. So the owner borrows more, buys more equipment, and assumes the next big contract is just around the corner. That optimism can be dangerous, because when demand doesn't arrive, the machines remain idle, but the debt payments don't. And that's how a booming factory can become an over-leveraged factory within just a few bad years. Part 7. Real failures. We've seen versions of this story before. During periods of major oil price volatility, small and mid-sized molders can get squeezed from both sides. Resin prices move rapidly, while many factory owners remain locked into fixed-price customer contracts. Costs rise, selling prices don't, and margins can disappear within months. The same thing can happen with automotive-dependent molders. Imagine building your entire business around one major automaker. You invest in machines. You hire workers. You build dedicated tooling. You expand the facility. Then the automaker moves a major program overseas, or brings production in-house. Suddenly, a huge percentage of your revenue disappears. But the machines are still there. The debt is still there. The employees are still there. The building is still there. The lesson is simple. This business rewards customer diversification and pricing flexibility far more than it rewards raw production capacity. Part 8. The real math. Let's put some real numbers on a hypothetical mid-sized plant. Say the factory generates around $8 million in annual revenue. Raw materials and resin account for roughly 35%, about $2.8 million. Labor, utilities, and maintenance take another 35%, another $2.8 million. Then there's debt service, equipment loans, facility financing. Depending on how aggressively the factory was financed, that could run between $600,000 and $900,000 a year. After all of that, the operating margin might land somewhere around 8 to 15%. That means roughly $650,000 to $1.2 million in annual operating profit, before taxes. But there's a catch. A new factory doesn't usually reach that point immediately. Once you factor in startup debt, customer acquisition, ramp-up time, and early inefficiencies, break-even may not arrive until year 3, or even year 5, not year 1. No matter how optimistic the original business plan looked. Part 9. Best case versus worst case. Now imagine two factory owners. They have similar machines, similar buildings, similar markets, but they make very different decisions. Best case? The owner locks in 3 or 4 long-term customers across different industries. The machines run at 85 to 90% utilization. Early profits are reinvested into automation, reducing labor costs and improving consistency. Over time, margins can climb toward 18 to 20%. Now look at the opposite. Worst case? The owner depends on 1 or 2 customers. Utilization falls to 55%. Resin prices suddenly spike in the middle of a fixed price contract. Then a major machine breaks, and the owner takes on more debt to pay for the emergency repair. Within 18 months, that same factory could become technically insolvent. Even with a busy production floor. Even with a full parking lot. Same machines. Same industry. Completely different fate. And the difference isn't the plastic. It's utilization, customer diversification, pricing, and financial discipline. Because in the end, you were never really buying an injection molding factory. You were buying a very expensive machine that converts electricity, steel, labor, and time into either profit or slow, quiet financial collapse. And whether that machine makes millions or silently destroys your fortune depends on a number most owners don't track closely enough. How many hours out of every single day is that machine actually running? ***. Because the plastic was never really the business. The clock always was.